Well, just because like the industry and everyone who's like a music fan, it kind of just hits you and you're like, oh wow, like it's progressing so rapidly, and
Yeah.
to the naked ear,
Yeah.
it sounds like another Drake song, right? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't really know, but the thing is,
Could we use the Drake song as the intro? Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 94. Who do we have?
Kevin Butler.
Michael Turksani.
I knew, yeah.
Yeah, just us. Just us again. Although we do need to pull the team in again. I think we're long overdue with a regular.
We're missing a more diverse base of insights from our team.
Yeah, but we got two of our main podcast people that used to be on the podcast with us more often are sick today. So,
There's stuff going around.
yep. All right. So 2024, we're towards the end of the first month in January, trying to figure out where we're at. Unhinged. So we're looking back at the last few weeks. So what have we been up to? What have we been up to the last 3 weeks?
Well, I think it's been interesting on the sales side. I guess if you want to start there, what we're seeing, and I've been talking with lots of other agencies and sort of other marketers just in totally different verticals and categories. And it seems like the resounding, and again, we're seeing this too, like the resounding feedback is what looked like really strong pipelines and really full ones just haven't quite got going yet. And I don't think like these opportunities are dead or anything like that, but like the pickup hasn't been immediate. And even speaking like with our sales team and other sales folks, it seems like this week, like the last full week of January, is the first week that some of that activity started coming back from the holidays, which is, I guess, a little soft compared to what I was sort of expecting coming the end of December. I thought we were going to be like roaring back into the new year and all guns a-blazing.
Yeah.
And so far that hasn't been the case. So I guess we'll see now, what does Feb and March look like as it relates to this quarter?
I think there's sales kickoffs. We just got through a deal, smaller deal, but a very large organization, multinational organization that just kind of pulled through yesterday or today. Yesterday? I can't remember. But they're still doing their kickoff. They're doing their kickoff next week. So, definitely probably more of that I've seen in any other year, just people kind of doing their kickoffs, kind of still within the beginning part of January and not moving forward.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We had the chance 2 weeks ago, I think, to go to Portland to do and participate as part of Acton's sales kickoff. And what kind of struck me is that theirs was reasonably early in January, but even then, like, just like, I think this is for a lot of organizations the first year they've done the full SKO again.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have underestimated the impact of 3, 4, 5 days out of the office in terms of catch up beyond that. Because like I'm following up with Acton and they're like, look, I'm sorry, I'm still catching up to all the things I missed when I was gone. And I think that's partially to blame in all this too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's more people that we were just talking about. We were traveling at the beginning of the month and we saw some clients. You guys saw Acton. Jen was here that same week. We had other people coming out from Edmonton that same week to meet with clients. So there's a lot. That was actually reasonably heavy early in the year on initial client engagements and stuff. Yeah, I think it'll pick up soon.
We have like, even like just for us, the last 3 days have been much more accelerated.
Yeah.
In a good way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we got that going on. We got little bit of tweaks to sort of like our goal setting. I think we went through that this year. So that's all done and out the door. Everybody's got kind of where our internal priorities are.
What I liked about that, it's not just kind of like your standard, take what you did last year and grow it by 30%. Like I think there's a lot more refinements to the particular areas we want to see growth in.
Yeah.
And a lot more definition around what those areas actually are, breaking them out in more detail and sort of more aligned around strategically, like what are we looking to do? And then what we do, which I think is a little different than a lot of other orgs, it's harder on the larger org scale, is like when you're defining these KPIs, part of the definition is like, how do we report on this? What are the characteristics inside of CRM that you can be using to be like just absolutely certain that what those reports are pulling are right, because we're going to base commissions and bonuses and ultimately understand our own performance based on these numbers.
Yeah.
So they got to be bulletproof.
Yeah. Yeah. And we know we made some pretty big changes to the layout of the organization last year with promoting some, some more accountability and responsibility into our directors. We've got a really strong account team and under
Delivery model.
Jer and and the back end delivery and putting in some additional pillars there. And, we're not a big company, 30 ish people, but getting to that stage where we're trying to double. So, putting some of that I guess more formality around how everyone can plan and know where they're sitting is a big deal. And then spending, time on AI this quarter and all throughout the year. But, where can we continue to see what works and what is kind of still a little bit ahead of the curve? And, we've doubled down on OpenAI's products and made sure we've got team accounts there. And we've got like what a team account is the ability to have multiple users and share access to the GPTs that you customize and building all those out for our customers and really doing a lot of refinement in that process and to some really good results, some surprising results, not just, generating content, but analyzing data. And, I think we were talking about how we went back and analyzed, 8 years of our sales and was able to do that over 2 hours. It would have taken us way longer to do and stuff like that.
I'd like to actually comment on that because I think that was a really interesting one. Certainly with the paid edition of GPT, you were able to upload files and kind of have it do things based on what's in those files. But some of the things, some like the prompts that you were giving, you're saying, hey, create like a new row for this, add up all the cells in that row, or sorry, a new column, add up all the rows in blah, blah, blah. And as arcane as it sounds, or archaic, you just can't do that very easily inside of a CRM.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at what you were doing. I'm like, to do that in Salesforce would have been a nightmare, and it certainly would have taken way, way longer. And you could have done some of that work inside of like a spreadsheet once you
pulled it all
export it all out from Salesforce. But even then, that would have been a pain too, right? So I think some of those use cases I hadn't initially thought of for ChatGPT, but I think there was kind of a cool exercise to see what it can actually do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does make you, I don't recommend people uploading personally identifiable data into that system just yet. But, when you've got a spreadsheet that just has, numbers and salespeople's names and, close dates and stuff like that, I think it gives you, gave us the ability to kind of really pivot on stuff really quickly that would be really a pain in the butt to do, which is why we've never done it before.
Yeah, like a good example of that, and even this would have been probably more difficult inside of just spreadsheet work. It was sort of articulating or changing definitions around what we call like new business versus existing. If this account group has, got a closed op one inside of the last year, it's not new business anymore, or it is. And we were kind of like changing things just to see what would that look like. That would have been a nightmare manually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
So it's still looking at that stuff. That's been really solid. And, there's a lot, I mean, it's just going to be insane what this does for our industry. I think, and I actually think that as a service provider, as we often say, being able to advise companies on how they can leverage this stuff is going to become something that I think more and more smaller deals kind of evolve. Maybe call them quasi training deals or consulting deals where we can take all the experience that we've had across hundreds of clients and wrestling with some of these tools and not unlike we do for the map or for the marketing automation platforms, go to them and say, hey, here's 5 things that you could start doing inside your own marketing team that'll just accelerate our customers' adoptions of this stuff. It's also kind of scary. I don't know if you listened to that Joe Rogan AI podcast. Did you listen to that?
No.
You should listen to it. It was sanctioned by him, but they did one, I think they made 6, and they were with people that he'd never done a podcast with, like Drake and Donald Trump. And it It was actually done, I think, out of an agency. It might have been an agency out of Australia that did it, but obviously trained it with the voices and then had two GPTs talking to each other to create the scripts. But it's wild. I mean, like after a while, it kind of gets. It's not as interesting. There's things where it gets a little repetitive, you might say, how they kind of spin their wheels a bit on stuff. But there's a lot of areas where it shocks me the level of depth and insight that comes out of the AI. Drake talking about how, why it's so important to have the human element in songwriting. And, we've got all these experiences and emotions, and how could you ever replace that with AI? And then you've got Joe being like, but we did replace it with AI because there was an AI song,
That's right.
for you, and people liked it. And he's like, I know, Joe, but it's still, you have to realize that it's the passion and it's the energy. And it's just like, really, really was quite mind blowing when I was listening to it. So it's crazy. We're at the early days of all this stuff. And I think when,
Do you know what no one talks about on the Drake thing for a second?
yeah,
And
what, the song?
well, just because like the industry and everyone who's like a music fan, it kind of just hits you, and you're like, oh wow, like it's progressing so rapidly, and
Yeah.
to the naked ear,
Yeah.
it sounds like another Drake song, right? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't really know, but the thing is,
Could we use the Drake song as the intro, Harsh?
is it
Okay, can we do
open rights or is
Well, I think you can do it for the first 15 seconds or something.
something like
so
that?
it's fine.
But the only reason it had pickup in like human level intrigue
Mm-hmm.
was because a human being in Drake has gone and created this persona, this brand, this whole like, I mean, he's pretty much like a lifestyle at this point with clothing and restaurants, blah blah blah.
Mm.
So that's the only reason it got pickup. If that was like named anything else and it didn't, like if real Drake didn't exist,
Oh,
who
like
would
if it
care?
was like Kevin Butler,
Yeah,
and
like-
it was like and it was like, oh, it's okay. I guess I heard that song was, yeah, it wouldn't have got pickup because like nobody knows who you are.
But that's a human element that is
Interesting.
based
Yeah,
off of
yeah,
it. No one
yeah,
talks about that. But
yeah.
it's scary on just a sonic level.
Yeah.
How much it sounds like. It does sound like him.
Yeah.
Without
yeah.
question, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. So now we're talking about we were going to pivot into I guess what we were sort of loosely calling the B2B marketing playbook. That that people have been using, and I had a meeting with an executive yesterday. We talked about part of what they're doing actually is a rethink on their business generally. In a number of different areas, but one of them being marketing, and that they can't really keep doing what they've been doing. And then we've heard we got back from Vancouver, and we had a very similar conversation with one of our longstanding clients about how they approach B2B lead generation, and all this kind of stuff. And
I've had a few other ones too already in January, and it's the same sort of thing.
yeah, so it sort of amounts to, hey, let's get these, lists, and let's get some opt-ins or what we might call an MQL, and drive up our MQLs and score these leads and flip them over to sales. And, sales is saying, hey, we're calling all these people and they don't, they're not going anywhere. And, there was a long period of time where that was the playbook. I mean, if you were VC invested, I mean, that's what they wanted to see is how many MQLs and how many SQLs, and how do you do that? You get downloads, you get opt-ins, you get webinar registrations, and
Yeah. So, okay. This is a point of contention for me. It's a bone to pick. Is that, that's like the 2010, 2012 marketing playbook, but
yeah,
MQLs, it's really derived around like, have you been able to create or generate a lead that meets the basic buying criteria? But things have changed so much now. It's not about buying criteria. Now it's about engagement and actual need. And I feel like B2B marketing was so immature all those years ago, 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago, where we weren't thinking about like need or intent and correlating levels of engagement and intent to say, hey, now this is actually ready for your time.
sure.
You being like the salesperson. The other thing is, all those years ago, buyers were nowhere near as sophisticated. And what I mean is like, they just weren't like preconditioned to search. They would still almost hang off everything like a Gartner or Forrester would say.
Right.
And now with the rise of things like community networking, like social media is arguably just as big in a work context as it is in like a social your friends context.
Yeah.
And that's really grown and evolved too. And people's desires to share their experiences, their knowledge
Yeah, it's
has
gone up.
absolutely exploded in the last 5 years. So now when you think about the old school MQL and well, it turns out this is an organization in a vertical we target at a certain revenue size or employee size means like absolutely nothing. So
Sure.
you're sitting here now and just out loud thinking like, oh yeah, we're talking about MQLs is kind of a joke, right?
Yeah, I also think that, the whole approach of trying to come up with what you think may be valuable to your audience, like here's a study on a certain technology group, or certain group of organizations using a piece of technology. Hey, I think I need that because I'm considering that technology, and then I go and I put my name in to get the white paper, and I get a million phone calls from salespeople. So what's kind of also happened is that same B2B marketing playbook has been used en masse, email like crazy, sequences like crazy. And not only the quality stuff, like maybe that would be an example of like a legit Forrester white paper that I may indeed still put my name in to get, because that's high enough value, with all this other garbage that's gone out because of the tooling. They can roll out, get a Zoom info list, blast a million emails, put people through all kinds of sequences. And when you look at what actually is being presented to you, it's like, this is no good at all, right?
Yeah.
So,
speaking of AI, like the quality of like even pre-AI explosion, the quality of ebooks in general has also decreased as more and more people try to replicate that playbook.
sure.
And then you bring in AI, and now people are just trying to create them out of
Willy nilly, right?
They're
So
not
you
great.
you get this other effect on the B2B marketing, or sorry, on the B2B buyer, that's like, I'm not putting my name into that form. I'm not responding
100%.
to an email. So like you've got this combination of like, it was probably not the greatest strategy anyway to just annoy people that got your white paper. You close some of them,
But you could get away with it.
but maybe you can get away with it. To all of a sudden now the entire industry has been doing that to the point where like you've saturated it, which has now opened up the opportunity for, if you're gating stuff now, it's just ridiculous, right? I think you should be providing, going back to what you're saying, I think there's two things that we should talk about. One, what's considered valuable. Two, what is considered a message? Like, what's your message, right?
Yeah, and maybe a third thing, and maybe I'll start here, is I think the buying journeys have changed a lot too.
Okay.
And what I mean is, just to kind of finish the previous thought I had, in that, like even 15 years ago, the only real way you could get data or like quality insights kind of thing would be either if you've got your Forrester membership, you get your seat and license,
And you can
get
drill
it from
through
them.
Yeah.
But most people don't. So then you're going to have to go and download it from a vendor who's paid for it.
Yeah.
They've got the syndication rights, etc. And so you would do that, and because like even like B2B technology buying, especially in like in marketing and marketing like tools,
Yeah.
the buyers weren't that mature from a process perspective. And I always separate, like IT has procurement jobs, marketers have needs, and they just go and like kind of buy things. And
Yeah.
even like the e-commerce early days, right? In the sort of early and mid 2000s, like that's the same thing we saw there. And so as a result, buyers just didn't know where to go. So
Yeah.
they're kind of trusting the sales reps of these vendors that they're talking to,
Yeah.
but they're not making informed decisions. And as a result, what they're doing is they're kind of not really practically understanding what these tools and technologies do and the challenges that they solve for. And then so they get these things, these products, these platforms, and it doesn't really do what they thought it did.
That's right.
I mean, the sales rep said it could do it, and
Oh, how many times we've heard that?
but now I think so that's kind of like the old school buyer's journey, and I'm simplifying it, so that's not really fair, but we don't have all the time in the world. But now what's changed is I think there's so much more information out there. There's like peer-led reviews, there's YouTube videos on almost any technology you can think of,
Right.
like tutorials, and the rise of sort of like expert consultants and things like that, who are, I'd say, more objective. And people have just sharpened and got more like astute themselves in terms of buying and procurement, where like you can't pull a fast one anymore, and the buyers aren't even going to let that happen. So they're doing so much more of the research before the level of intent and engagement perk up in the eyes or the dashboards of the vendors.
Yeah.
And so the sales cycles and the buying journey might be as long as it's always been, but it's like reduced like a third now.
Right.
So that's the lead into now. Let's talk about how organizations and providers are actually going to create messaging that really lands, because that's the next key thing here.
Yeah. And I think in the past, so, we didn't have such saturation on social media networks when a lot of the old school buying journey existed, right? It was like you're doing email, you could probably get response from people if it was half decent back then. It's very difficult to do that now. Not that you can't, and I think we'll talk about that. But with the social networks being where we spend a lot of our time, it's where our energy goes. And if you're B2B, let's just say LinkedIn right now, right, as your main, it doesn't have to be, it could be other places too, but let's just say LinkedIn for a minute. There's ways to get that message across that isn't a white paper that's 15 pages long, right? Yeah. You might address a thing in your white paper that has to do with, the total cost of ownership with owning some, type of software platform that you solve for. And you can get away with doing that in a 15-second clever video about, poking fun at how difficult it is to manage pricing across your retail environment or something, right? And then that right there is saying, oh, hey, that's cool. I have that problem, but I did it in a 15-second short. I didn't write a 15-page, thing on it with all this research that nobody's going to read.
My first year as a marketer, I remember writing a 4-page case study on website personalization. Right. 4 pages. Now, like, you're lucky if that's 2 scrolling tiles on LinkedIn.
Yeah, swipe. I got my personalization. It works, right?
Yeah. Raise traffic, raise conversions, move on.
Yeah.
4 pages. I don't even know how I wrote 4 pages.
Yeah. Who's reading that?
But you're right. Like, people's patience and willingness to invest that much time, like, they just don't need to now. They won't.
Right. So I think on the, we can talk maybe about messaging piece, but I think on the value piece, a lot of people are still in this like self-serving mode of content creation. And what does that look like? It's like, I'm putting out content to make sales instead of putting out content that helps my audience get value or solve a problem that they might have, right? So we're not obviously in the business of like, we're not here to not do deals, right? We have to do deals. But if you're putting out content that helps a customer through a problem, like, hey, you know what? Here's how you can plan your AI journey, because you're probably going to need some AI tools, right? And it actually adds value. It's not a piece of junk, right? That simultaneously helps, right? That's why those contents do really well, because it's the customer's getting value and they're saying, hey, I got that value from Goose Digital. Maybe I'll pass it along to somebody, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, you're like, oh, I'm going to gate that content. I'm not going to let anybody get access to that template unless they put an email address, and now I'm going to hound them. And now you've seen a trend where like that's going down. So I think the value conversation has to change, where it's like, we're not just going out there and like tooting our own horn. We're looking at, what could we give to this community that would simultaneously get our brand out there, but would also help them solve something in their day-to-day.
I think there's so many layers to that, and it's absolutely what's required and expected. It just makes more sense, right? But I think there's a rise in competition across any software category or service category. Right. There's greater competition for budgets, whether it's directly or indirectly. Even now, there's more pressure on budgets to be as efficient as possible. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, like, I think buyers have just gotten tired of the old way of doing things, right? So now, and I've had like a bunch of sessions like this already this year, is I'm trying to really challenge the value props that we're going out with. Like,
yes, so this is messaging.
Yeah, this is messaging for sure. And then I think we'll talk about, I think your word was the volumization.
Yep.
Or the blowing up of the message,
yep,
like in a distributive way. But to me, I'm challenging all my clients and all the work that I'm kind of involved with to be, how do we go deeper than just surface level value props? It can't just be, oh, we'll make you more efficient.
Yeah.
You got to get it really into the meat of, what does this mean for you? Why would you be interested in even exploring this particular conversation and benefit?
Yes.
And I think if anyone listening, like if you're really honest with yourself and you look at these value props, like, are they good enough? And for me, like, what I found was like, we can be better, we can be tighter, and I'll be the one to sort of push everyone to say, like, how can we make this even more resonating as far as what we think our audience really would like to hear and want to hear?
Right.
That's just going to better serve you. And I frankly expect a lot of our competitors and our clients' competitors to be doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, this is kind of taking it a little bit more to the creative end of the spectrum, which I've seen a bit of a shift in some of the more, you might call them more generic B2Bs that are out there, like not big companies. These are small, medium companies that typically don't have very exciting creative strategies, where all of a sudden I'm starting to see, a kind of like one of the ones that I follow, they kind of want to be known for being very innovative and inventive. They claim that they've invented this software and they want to be very innovative. So part of their creative strategy in social is to attach themselves to big inventions, big accomplishments in the world, right? Like, the wheel being built is one of them, right? Did we invent the wheel? No, we didn't, but we can help you kind of get through this. The Panama Canal, some of these elements, right? And I think that's really interesting when you think of, like, let's say that example you gave about attaching your brand to efficiency, right? Maybe it's not through hey, we're going to help you be 15% more efficient. Maybe it's talking about, it's associating their brand with a bunch of things that are really efficient.
But that tracks. Right? Like, I really like that. Like, at some point you're going to have to get into like more specifics about you and the kinds of like problems you're solving.
Yes.
But what you're actually talking about is more like bigger picture storytelling.
Yes.
Building a brand around recognized things that made cultural and huge economic impact.
Sure.
So I really like that. Now, I guess you could be cheesy about it, or you could be really tactful, and how you tell that story is really important too. But at a high level, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if there's other things around the messaging, but certainly one of the things that you've brought up is that, there's a quality of content. And then what I was bringing up was there's a volume of content, if you want to call it that.
Sure. So let's take this, like, you've got a really strong value proposition. It's clear, it impacts, it's pretty heavy as a, punch. Then I think to the volume play, you don't have to go create a dozen white papers on that theme or the problem that you're solving. I think though, what you do have to do is take this and say, how do we cut this up and distribute it in more sort of bite-sized, digestible ways?
Yeah.
Do you have, like, I don't know, up to 6 different video clips of your thought leader, expert executives talking about this stuff? Do you have really quick sort of like case studies or testimonials that can support these things? Maybe even quick product videos, if that's kind of more in how you sell your products, right? So I think it comes down to, like, you got to have hard hitting themes, and then a real clear plan from your marketing team as how you're going to distribute those and cut them up. Right.
And I think then when you talk about channel, if you say something as boring or as old school as, say, email, right? You could also say direct mail, but let's say email. Well, now you've got high quality content, a bang on messaging. I think, is there a risk that you just get the delete button? Yes. But
that was always there, right?
It was always there, and you're going to be a lot higher above, like, you're going to raise above all that other crap that's out there. The classic right now is the B2B marketer who is probably rolling through some sort of sequence, but it makes it look like they've emailed you 4 or 5 times.
Putting like the RE.
Yeah, RE. And then it actually, and then I go back and I actually search my inbox, and, like, I've never received an email, or I've searched my trash. I've never got a second email, or, another email from this person. So it's like some tactic, like, oh, you still need to, like, let me know, right? Garbage. Whereas if you bring that up and it's like, hey, we've got a video, it talks about this, we've got this stuff, I think your likelihood of getting engagement is,
I like that
huge.
Call out for actually 2 other reasons. Like, one, there's a level of, like, credibility and trust, right? And if you're actually going to go through your inbox and be like, well, did you email me before? And it's not there.
Terrible.
Then you're like, well, okay, like, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Borderline sketchy. And so, like, that's maybe your first opinion or one of your earlier opinions on this company. Like, good luck. They're not going to ever sell to you now.
Yeah.
And I think going back to your story around the organization talking about where they're associating themselves with, like, really big picture things, it's about telling this whole cohesive story. So imagine they're the same company. They're not. But imagine and you're like, okay, so they sold this big thing. They're highly innovative, innovation itself, it's really huge. And then it's like, then you've got this salesperson who's kind of making up emails that you didn't actually send to me.
Right.
So like you've got to have a cohesive story from brand into individual as part of that sales journey.
100%. And then it goes, then I think it goes back to sort of, well, what's the B2B marketing playbook, for 2024? And I think that you should still have an audience that you've defined. You should, and let's call it, audiences within, an email platform. I don't see a problem with rolling people through drip messaging. I think the content strategy that you're bringing up is what's critical.
Yep.
What I'm saying is that, and I'm not suggesting you email people a million times. I think there's a volume of content, particularly around social media, that is really not anywhere close to where it should be with a lot of organizations. And I think part of that is the company page. And I think another part of it is the senior executives, especially for like growth oriented organizations that, they're out there in the marketplace trying to make traction, right? Because everybody's got a level of social impact. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. It's no surprise. I mean, I think Goose Digital, let's say its page could be doing a lot more. Like it could be posting way more video, way more content throughout the week. What is the strategy? What's the quality? It has to be there. And then us as executives, we could be doing way more. Like if we just said we're spending even a half an hour a day, that's what we're going to do on, because how many thoughtful posts can you really do in a half an hour, right? Yeah. Probably maybe 3, by the time you look at it and understand it and write it and really know, it's not going to be like a dozen. Right. But you could like a few things, but like, you know what I mean?
Say like it has to be, for example, your post, like you're sharing something like, rather significant, like a quality post versus contributing to someone else.
Well, that's what it would be. That would be an example one. Like I'm going to reply back into somebody's, but I got to think about that reply. I got to make, right. So there's only so much I can do, but you wonder, if you did that 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week
for a quarter,
what kind of organic reach would you get as an individual, and then back into your organization?
So I think this is actually perhaps the next one. This would be a podcast in its own, and I think it's. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this with one of my engagements is exploring the role of brand versus individual, and trying to separate and be more deliberate about some of the marketing tactics we use for each.
Okay.
Like. At some point, if I'm the salesperson, for example, the buyer is going to put trust and belief in me, right? I'm credible. I seem like I know what I'm talking about. Generally, like the guy likes me, the buyer likes me, and feels like he can have a conversation with me kind of thing, right? But at some point, they're going to say, okay, so we like him. Who does he work for? Like, let's see this, right? Oh, okay, the organization's got a lot of credibility, tons of experience. There's lots of other great people at the org too. Okay, now we're starting to see a cultural fit amongst orgs.
Right.
So some of the marketing shifts a bit. It's all part of that cohesive story, but how does the brand actually go and tell that story, like on properties like websites, some social media, right?
Yeah.
Email.
Yeah.
But then there's still got to be the upkeep of the individual that you're buying from, because people at the end of the day buy from people.
Right, right.
So I think that would be a really interesting podcast on its own.
Yeah. So I think if you're out there and you're looking at, your 2024 and you have a distribution pipeline, you might need agency support to, consistently activate that pipeline. Hey, we want to make sure that we've got X number of things running every single day and week, and we don't have enough internal staff to make sure that happens, right? Okay, good. So we've got our distribution pipeline, getting into strategy sessions around what's the messaging, and then getting into strategy sessions around what's the volume, where do we think our gaps are, and what can we leverage, right? In terms of that, like this podcast is a great example where, you do a couple of these, you get a lot out of it. We've talked about that before: clips, blog posts, social posts, It's a highly efficient way to generate content, right?
Oh, it beats anything else. Like and most organizations have people in their in their roster who can talk about their business. But for us to sit here and write like a blog or two that's like, makes sense and articulate and we're happy with it, it's going to take 3 times as long.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that'd be the guidance, and to really put the value spin on it for me is, offer something to the world, like offer something to your audience that's going to help them to, help them solve their business problems that your business can also deliver as a service, right? Obviously don't give your stuff away entirely for free, but provide a lot of that for free, a lot of that advice, a lot of that guidance. That should be part of your plan, so that you reach those people and then they share it because it's something that's valuable. And then when they're ready to buy, they'll come to you, right? So
yeah, don't gate it and risk them not seeing it.
Exactly.
That's the biggest risk.
Yeah. I'd rather have 10,000 downloads of a PDF and, than 5 people or 100 people, come in that I'm going to have to hound, or 1,000 people that we're going to have to hound and send through sales that never had a chance to buy. But now of the remaining 9,000 people, 500 actually, come to us, right?
I would tweak what you said. I'd rather have 3 people come to me.
Yeah.
I read this piece. I'd like to talk about it more with you, than 500 leads who just downloaded it.
Yeah, that we'd have to go chase and follow up.
Because it's not about how many people read it. It's about how many actually responded to it.
Exactly.
And they're just cutting out that middleman of, we have 500 leads. Let's figure out which ones are good.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Okay, that's it. Good stuff.
All right. Till next time.
Till next time.